Okay, hi everyone. It's me, Erin Minckley, coming at you now from a very professional podcasting studio. And I wanted to record a video podcast so that I can basically give you a life update, and anyone that's been following along on the progress of my most exciting and most stressful venture up until now, which is I've been kind of trying to purchase my screen printing manufacturer who went out of business in July. So it's now November 2024, and this is just kind of an extension of the Artists Who Thrive podcast and the Artists Who Thrive book club. And I'm writing a new book. It's hopefully going to come out before the end of the year, and it's called Pattern to Profit. So I have basically spent the last 9 years obsessed with trying to figure out how to make money as an artist. And it's what inspired the book Artists Who Thrive that I wrote in 2020. It inspired me opening my own business called Relativity Textiles, which some of you may know. We create wallpaper and fabric. And when I say we, it's me. It's just me. This is a brand that I really 9 years ago thought was a passion project. And I raised money on Kickstarter. I raised $21,000 in 60 days to get my company off the ground. And since then, wallpaper has really taken a serious turn in popularity. And it's now in trend and in vogue. You see it in every design magazine. But when I was in design school, going to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, it was a labor of love to create your own textiles. There were software programs out there like Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop, which have come a long way in the last 10 years. But I learned how to do everything by hand, and I learned how to screen print fabric, which is what I was doing in graduate school, by hand. So I was making my own textiles for 3 years before Relativity Textiles started. So somewhere in the middle of that story, I got a job working at a wallpaper manufacturer, and I worked for a year and a half at a company called Artisan Handprints here in Chicago. And I was the girl Friday. So I used to pick up the phone and say, "Hi, you're an artist and you have some designs. Let me help you get those ready for print production." And in some cases, I would take their art and put it into Adobe Illustrator and make it physically repeat, because a lot of artists at that time didn't know how to do that. And there weren't lots of online courses for this, and there weren't iPads that you could draw on. So in some cases, people were sending us scans of drawings, paintings, watercolor paintings, all kinds of different things that they wanted to have screen printed. And I don't know how much you guys know about textile production, but there's really a rise in digital technology and digital printing. Last year, I bought my own digital printer, and I print my own wallpaper in my studio in Chicago. But screen printing is something that's been around for a very long time, dating all the way back to, I believe, 6th or 7th century, where they were actually using silk to make screens and printing using silk. So that's why it's called silk screen. And the factory that I worked at ended up becoming the place that made much of my wallpaper. And I ended up leaving to start my own business. They've been using screen printing to create wallpaper since 1974. And after 50 years in business, the owner was just old and tired and didn't really have anyone that was interested in keeping his business alive. He had one very big client named Huga & West, who, if you guys are here in the wallpaper world, I'm sure you know who Huga & West are. And I got to know them well, the owners of that company. Their selling mostly direct to consumer using e-commerce. And I got to work with them hand in hand when they produced a line for Rifle Paper Co., for Justina Blakeney, for Oh Joy, Julia Rothman, Heath Ceramics. They have so many collaborations with different artists that they were doing, and I got to be a part of that. In fact, I got to talk to Justina Blakeney on Skype in 2014 or 15 and taught her Adobe Illustrator. So I got to gather like so much amazing experience from having worked in the factory, but I also learned everything there was to know from the back end. Like, where does paper come from? How do you create a film and a screen? How does your art translate in Illustrator? How do you separate the layers for colors? How do you make a purchase order? How do you drop ship something? When do you know that you need a fulfillment center to send everything to have them drop ship it for you? So this was me watching other brands like Amy Wilder and Caitlin Wilson grow from the behind the scenes, like seeing it from the manufacturer's point of view. So I believe that I've always had a really unique vantage point in this industry for that reason, is that I worked in a factory and I saw things getting printed and I understand how things are made and designed for the process. So fast forward 9 years, I've printed in many different places with many different mills and manufacturers. I've done a lot of homework to figure out who's out there and what kinds of print methods are they using, anywhere from the UK to Australia to the US. And I feel like I know a lot of people in this industry just by being here for about a decade. And I went to the owner of Artisan Handprints and I said, "Hey, Murray, I really would love to buy your company, buy your business." And he just shook his head and was like, "There's no way you can do that." And I think he meant that in a couple different ways, but what I later found out was that, he really wasn't looking to sell his business. He really didn't have a list of clients that was going to sustain running that business anymore, because Huga and West took their production to somewhere else. And for that reason, I would really have to be starting from scratch if I wanted to run that business in the same way. But I really thought of it as a business opportunity. Like, this is what sets me apart, I think, from a lot of artists, is that I always am looking for the next money-making, expanding, growth moment that I can possibly find, because I'm always looking to create more income for myself. I'm a single mom. I think a lot of people in our industry are pursuing these passion projects of running their own businesses without necessarily having to be profitable and having to sustain their entire quality of life with their company. And I think that sets me apart because I really don't have any excuse. I don't have any way for things to not work out financially. So I had to learn my numbers. I had to learn my profit margin. I had to understand all of how a business works. And when this idea to own my own manufacturing came up, I thought about companies like here in Chicago. Meg Made is a furniture brand, and I know Meg and Joe Piercy well. And they started their business about 15 years ago. And they have all of their painting in-house. So they employ someone, they have a painting booth that you could basically pull a car into this space because it's so big, and they paint all their own furniture. But if they were to outsource that to someone else and have them paint the furniture, let's say it costs $100 to paint a dresser and they're selling it for $200, well, then they only have that 50% profit margin. So I'm thinking about other types of businesses that have their own manufacturing in-house and how the labor of that, even with an overhead and insurance and other types of things, you're always going to stand to make more money if you're making it yourself instead of paying someone else to do it for you. So I'm thinking about this manufacturer in two ways. One, it's a really great way to connect with other artists and use my expertise and my knowledge and my skill set to be of service to others. But also selfishly, yes, like I want to make more money. I want my business to grow. I want to hire more employees, and I want to take myself out of the business as much as possible so that I can focus on what I'm really good at, which is the creative part and the drawing and, the relationship building and those types of facets of the business that are really exciting to me. So I did ask Murray, okay, if you're not going to sell your business, would you sell all of the equipment in the shop? And he was reluctant, but we had a phone conversation where he said, okay, if you really want to buy all of the equipment, you can have it for $100,000. And this was going to potentially include digital, so like 3 digital machines where you can print wallpaper digitally, 4 printing presses that are these kind of ancient dinosaur machines that have been working since somewhere before I was born, and I'm 42. So these machines are really old, but they still work. And I wanted to keep employed some of the people that were working in the shop and keep the screens that belong to some of the designers that I have referred many of them to Artisan Handprints as Relativity Textiles. So many people come to me and say, hey, where do you make your wallpaper? And in certain situations, I would tell them, here's my guy in Chicago, call him. And so Murray got very busy in the last 10 years. He had a lot of volume of sales, and I believed that his revenue was like around $1.5 million. And so I thought, okay, if I can just reinvent this, make a couple changes to be a little more ecologically friendly and update some of the technology, then I would buy all of his equipment for $100,000. So what did I do? With all of my past history in crowdfunding, I thought, okay, I don't have much time before he sells his building to a new owner. And one part of the story that I left out is that the owner of my building, where my storefront space is and my retail location for Relativity Textiles, the landlord of that building is a real estate developer who owns many buildings in the northwest side of Chicago. And Artisan Handprints is only 5 minutes away from Relativity Textiles. So I told Nick, who owns this real estate development company, hey, I think Murray is going to be ready to sell his building in the factory. If you were to buy the building, can you try to get him to leave everything inside? And then either I'll buy it from Murray, or I'll buy it from you, or I'll lease the building with everything in it, and I'll become the tenant of this building that you own. So I put together a GoFundMe campaign, like, literally when you're sitting in bed, not sleeping, it's 5 o'clock in the morning, and you're like twirling around all these ideas in your mind of, okay, how could I make this work? How could I make this work? Who do I know? Who can I call? What's like an easy, fast way to get this $100,000? And I really couldn't come up with anything else other than to do a crowdfunding campaign. But I only had, supposedly, 2 weeks before the building sold. And Murray had asked me to write him a check for $100,000. So I went on GoFundMe. Nice thing about GoFundMe is that you don't have to make a well-produced 4-minute video. You can just put a static image and then put your ask. And I went on there and I published it on Facebook and Instagram, and I said, hey everyone, I'm buying a factory and help me buy this wallpaper factory. And within 3 days, I had raised $3,000. And I was pushing this out in my Instagram stories and on Facebook, and I was sending the link to this campaign to a lot of people that I know. And most of the wallpaper designers who had just lost their screen printing shop were very excited about the potential that all of their screens would be preserved and that the production would stay where it was, because it's very costly to have your screens made again, and it's very costly to have your paper shipped from one location to another. So I sent this out to everyone, and I was ambitiously thinking I was going to raise $100,000 on GoFundMe. Well, it didn't quite go as planned. And so I went a little quiet because so many obstacles were put in my path in the last 30 days or more. And that was about 30 days ago that I put out the campaign. So number one was I wrote a check to Murray, and I went and met with Murray and Nick, the former owner and the new owner, and I gave Murray a check for $50,000, which I actually, if he had cashed it, would have been in the negative by a lot of money. And so I was like, okay, here's a check, and I intend to have enough money to cover it, but it's only $50,000. It's half of what he had asked for. And he gave me a couple reasons why he was not going to accept the money. He, first of all, told me, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to run this shop, which, in my opinion, I had already been running the shop when I worked there. I knew everything about production, and I have one potential lead for production manager who I would hire back, and he would basically run the shop. So we between the two of us, we already know a lot of how that shop is run. But I really don't think that Murray had the faith in a young female entrepreneur that she was going to know how to run his business. And so I could already tell that his ego was involved, and he wasn't interested in taking my check for $50,000 because the original ask was $100,000. I'm gonna take a sip of coffee. So if his original ask was $100,000 and I'm offering him half, he's not getting the bargain that we struck. And so he told me, no, I asked you for $100,000 and that's what it's worth to me. So I asked him if I could bring someone in, like an engineer or a mechanic or somebody that knows how to run the printing presses, and see if they actually work. And he said, no, as far as I know, they're in working condition, and they will be when I leave in 2 weeks. And I said, okay, but I want to make sure that you're not going to do something like out of spite, because I had walked through the shop that day after doing my GoFundMe page, after writing him a check for $50,000, and he had taken a razor blade and slashed all the screens. So all the silk mesh that is the part that you print with was gone, and the aluminum frames that holds the mesh was the only thing left. So now I have this new obstacle of remaking all the screens if I want to keep the business of the people who were printing there, as well as my own screens that I actually asked him to preserve for me. They were also gone. And screens are pretty costly to remake. They're like $300 to $500 a piece for one color, and if you have a 3-color design, that's $1,500. So, you know, I have many different SKUs with many different colors, and I would have to remake everything from scratch. And so would a lot of other more established designers who have more patterns with more colors. So I said, Murray, I want to make sure that you're not going to do anything to these machines to make it so that they're inoperable. I need sort of a guarantee. If I'm going to go raise the other $50,000 and write you a check for $100,000, I don't want to purchase a lump of junk, like something that doesn't work, and then you're $100,000 richer and I'm at square one. So I want to make sure you're not going to damage everything before you go. And he said, damn right I would. And as he looked me straight in the eye and told me that out of spite, he was going to make it impossible for me to do what I was trying to do, I politely told him, Murray, goodbye. And I took my $50,000 check and I went home. And I sat there and just thought to myself, okay, it's over. Like, your crazy dream is not going to work. And I know you've been wanting to own this factory for like 10 years. And I know that the very first business plan you ever wrote was to open a screen printing studio and make your own wallpaper. That was like 15 years ago. But like, it's just not a possibility. And then my little mind just kept busy. And the theme of this video, for anyone else who's out there trying to do some big, hairy, audacious goal, is that you have to, every time in this process of the last 2 months, every time like a barricade was put in between me and my goal, I just had to figure out a solution. Like, I just had to figure out a way to go around the obstacle, and I had to figure out someone else who could help me and some other resource that I hadn't thought of. So I looked into SBA loans. I looked into equipment financing. There's companies out there that if you're buying a machine that's new, they will give you money, but they said because the machines are ancient, that there wouldn't be able to finance those, but that I could potentially buy like new equipment. And so I spoke with Nick and he said, listen, I think that you just have to be patient and wait. And once the building sells, then we go back in and see if anything works. And you just have to see, what is Murray gonna do? And so I had it in the back of my mind that like something might happen where I would go back in to the shop and everything would be like beat up with a hammer or something. I kind of knew that like that could be a possibility. I also knew that because I just walked away and took my check and didn't pay him anything, maybe he knew that I was going to give up and he was expecting me to give up. And because I didn't reach out to him again, maybe he just assumed that I was gone. But it's just so interesting because as I have explained this to different investors and different mentors and so many people that I've talked to after the fact, so many of them said, well, why? Why would he do that? Like, why would he do anything like that out of spite? And I really do think that, when you spend time working for someone, and this is particular to me, I am neurodiverse, I am full of ideas, very outspoken, high energy, ambitious person. And when I worked at Artisan Handprints, I was constantly telling Murray that we should do this and this to market the business. Like, this guy in 50 years barely had a website when I came and I helped him build a website, barely had any marketing. I helped him grow a social media following, and really did no networking other than a couple of trade shows. And he was going for these like sports borders and stuff that wasn't really like high-end luxury interior design industry. And so he didn't like the fact that someone else was telling him, hey, you should run your business in another way. He wanted to feel like he was running his business great, doing things his own way. and he wanted just someone to validate him. And so that was ultimately one of the real reasons why I decided to start my own business, is because I knew that my value was never going to be utilized in that position. I also was making like minimum wage and had no health insurance and no retirement and no paid time off, nothing. So I started my own business, and I hope that I can be the boss that he wasn't someday. But he always kind of just looked at me as if his 13-year-old daughter had come to him and said, "Hey, Dad, can I have the keys to your Porsche?" Like, he wasn't going to give it away. And he didn't think I could handle it. And he was very sure that he was the only person that could handle it. So I, just to back up a little bit. So what ended up happening is I spoke with Nick, the landlord, about what my lease obligations would be to rent the new space. And since he had just purchased the building for $600,000 and had it appraised for $850,000, he realized that the monthly rent was between $10,000 and $12,000. And so I was trying to negotiate some terms with him for a 5-year lease where I would potentially get the first 6 months free rent, but roll those months into year 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that the first year I was really only paying $60,000 to lease the space. And this is when I called up my mentor that I hadn't talked to in almost 8 years, named Nancy, who is one of the mentors at SCORE. I can never remember for the life of me what the acronym SCORE stands for, but if you Google it, the last 2 letters are retired executives. So these are people that are former CEOs, CFOs, and they've run their own businesses. They've mentored many different entrepreneurs. And I called Nancy and said, "Hey, I want to buy a factory." And she said, "Okay, let's get on a Zoom call and figure out all what is involved in this crazy idea of yours." And I had to start putting together a lot of spreadsheets. So in the last 2 months, I've looked at spreadsheets for probably 50% of my working hours. And I'm not a spreadsheet person. Like, I do love math and I do love money and numbers, and I do love projections because it lets you feel hopeful about the future. But I don't want to spend all my time in there. So I had to figure out what were the labor costs going to be if I hired back some of the staff, who were the potential clients, and could they guarantee that they were going to print the same amount of wallpaper this year as they did last year? And like, what was the number? Like, how much wallpaper are they going to print, and will it cover that $10,000 a month rent? Or are they only spending $10,000 a year? Like, Relativity Textiles is not spending more than $60,000 a year producing wallpaper. So I know that some other smaller brands may be below that. And I started digging into the client list and trying to figure out who was printing there before. I also needed to know about the machines. If I wanted to make one of these machines from scratch, what would it cost nowadays? A printing press is only $30,000, so that's pretty exciting. But it would require that I use some of the current other machines, like the trimming machine and the drying machine that are still there in the shop. The renovations would be taken care of by the new owner, so that was nice. I would have to buy a bunch of paper and a bunch of ink. I would have to... Oh, now I'm just thinking through all of the different things. And so I got some advice from, okay, guys, this is where you have to do what the Thetas taught me in college, which is when I was pledging a sorority, they would ask us obscure questions that we didn't know the answers to, and we'd say, "We don't know." And they would say, "Use your resources." And then they would make us go find like an alumni and ask her the answer to a question. So These are the kinds of things that I've brought with me into the world of business from being a sorority pledge. Use your resources. So I know that one of the kids in my son's class, his dad works with venture capitalists, and he does something in that realm. And so I just emailed him and said, hi, I think I need to put together a pitch deck for a very exciting new venture of mine. Can you help me? And he sent me a couple of links on LinkedIn of like how to build a pitch deck. And I used those templates to create a very straightforward, showing all the math, 12 slide presentation in PowerPoint that shows exactly what I need money for the first year to make it to profitable. And I know how many rolls we can print every day on each of the presses. So I know what our capabilities are. And if we were printing 800 rolls a day and we're charging $40 for a roll, that's $36,000 a day in potential revenue. So it's like very exciting to a potential investor that it's like a $5 million a year business if we are operating at full capacity and if we have enough clients to come print screen printed wallpaper. So I would be responsible for like finding the new clients, and I started calling everyone I know. Hi, do you want to make screen printed wallpaper? I might be the new owner of a wallpaper factory. And that has been an interesting journey as well, because what you find out is that everyone's very excited about your idea, but they're not going to jump on your train and go with you forward. They're going to wait until they know for sure that what you're doing is actually going to happen, and then they're going to sign up. So I had so many interesting conversations with so many people, and a lot of them were like, wow, Erin, this is a really exciting idea and an exciting opportunity. I might want to invest, but none of them did. Not yet anyways. And so it's like all fallen on me. This is like the thing about having a really great idea is that no one's going to execute it for you. You're going to have to be the one to figure it out, and you're going to have to be the one to fail. And when you have a big, huge roadblock put right in front of you, either you have this decision. It's like, do I quit? I could have quit like 7 or 8 times in the last 2 months. I could have just said, this is too hard. I'm a single mom. I only have so much time and so much bandwidth, and I'm not going to pursue it because it's too hard to figure it out. But what happens for me is when I like give up, or I sit back and go, oh, I can't, or I don't know how, or gosh, no one's out here helping me, and I wish I had like a whole team of cheerleaders, is that something deep inside me says, bet on yourself. When no one else has put in money, when no one else has written you a check, when no one else is doing you any favors, and in fact, Murray did remove all the motors from all the screen printing presses. Motors cost like around $2,000 to $3,000 brand new, and he sold them on eBay or Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or I don't know where. And I went in to go operate the press once the shop now belongs to Nick, and he has been generous to let me go in there. I'm like, can I have a key? He's like, no, it doesn't work that way. I need a deposit. This has to be your space for you to go in. So I've gone in several times with different people and different workers who understand the machines, and we tried to turn them on, and there's no motor. He also took all these tiny little pipes that control the table, because there's a vacuum from under the table that sucks all the air through tiny little holes in the tabletop so that the paper gets flat up against the table so that when it prints, it doesn't move. And he took a little pair of scissors and cut all the tubing from the vacuum so the paper wouldn't get sucked down. And I don't understand people. I don't understand what the motivation is behind that kind of a conniving action. But I have to sort of take my feelings about that out and just say, okay, it happened. Like, what are you going to do next? And so I started calling like Granger and said, hi, I need a motor, but I don't even know what kind of motor. Like, can someone help me? And these are the kinds of things that I've realized through this process. This process for me in 10 years in business is about expansion. It's about growth and learning new stuff and challenging myself to get to a level that I didn't even necessarily anticipate that I would ever get to. Finding the resources, hunting them down, figuring out all the numbers, calling whoever you have to call, going and visiting a shop over on Montrose Avenue. They make printing presses for all types of screen printing manufacturers, not just wallpaper. These people are printing hospital beds and t-shirts and posters and all kinds of things using screen printing, and they make the presses. The $30,000 brand new press is made here in Chicago, like 5 minutes away from my current shop. So it's kind of interesting how like every time I go, it's impossible, there's like something right beyond that thought that's like, actually, it's probably possible. You just have to like expand. You just have to like allow yourself to grow and learn more and try harder. But without that deep-seated belief in myself and this kind of, what do they call it in psychology? Heroic individualism. It's like, I'm the only fucking one who's going to come in here and help me. I'm the only one who's going to come up with the answer. I'm the only one who can make all the calls and make the spreadsheet and pitch the idea to an investor. They're going to most likely invest in me, not my math, not my PowerPoint presentation. And I had to redo the PowerPoint presentation, by the way, because I had one of my former employees who's an amazing UI UX designer do this very beautiful PowerPoint presentation, and I had someone pick it apart and say, okay, it's really pretty and there's lots of fluffy language, but it doesn't say the very basic information. So how do I wrap this video up? Essentially, I don't have the answer yet for what's going to happen. I don't have the answer for do I even own this factory or not? I don't. Right now, I'm pitching this idea to multiple investors. I've taken my pitch deck and I've met a lot of really interested people, for some of whom it's a larger investment than what they're willing to risk. For some of whom they have feedback on, maybe I should just consider this an expansion of Relativity Textiles and a new arm of Relativity Textiles, rather than saying, okay, this is a startup, it's a fully new business. I didn't buy Artisan Handprints, but I'm going to go do a different business like Artisan Handprints. And I was thinking about them as separate. One of the investors was like, I would probably be more inclined to invest in Relativity Textiles because you have almost 10 years in business and, you know, a track record of growing your revenue every year. And so, you know, I'm looking at different ways of funding it through SBA loans, and my time is kind of running out. The renovation for the space is going to start soon, and the new owner said that on the week before Thanksgiving, he wants either a lease signed or everything's going to have to get tossed. And it breaks my heart thinking that this love of the dying art form of screen printing that I have is going to have to perish. But I know that even if artisan handprints doesn't last another year, that I could probably start a print shop on my own, having done all this research about buying new machines. And I could probably fund it in another way rather than having an investor involved. I could potentially, get some financing for brand new equipment and pay that off little by little. So these are the types of things that I'm looking into right now. I wanted to give everyone an update because they're asking what's going on with the wallpaper factory. And that's kind of everything I have for you guys at this point right now. So I'm still trying to raise money on my GoFundMe. It's at $3,000. I haven't done anything to advertise it, so I'm probably going to launch this video and try to relaunch the campaign with a little more interest. And my current obstacle is that the new owner is, a property management company. And they said because of the amount of the lease and the length of the lease, which is 5 years, it's a very kind of commercial lease, that he would like to see either I have $250,000 in the bank, or I have someone that's going to sign the lease as a co-signer and a guarantor. So all of these intricacies were new to me. It was new information. I thought, okay, I just have to write Marie a check for $100,000. Then that didn't happen. Okay, maybe I just need to give a $10,000 deposit for the first month's rent. And so I wrote a check to the property management company for $10,000. This is the amount that I ended up changing the GoFundMe to, from $100,000 to $10,000. But realistically, I need to have in the next 3 weeks $250,000 in my bank account, or a cosigner and an investor, in order to keep going with this crazy idea. And if it doesn't work, you guys, I think, knowing what I know, having gone through this process, it's definitely been worth all of the mental gymnastics that I've done to get to this point. I feel like a much stronger business person because of what I've done. I feel like I have a lot of help from my mentors, and we can just find a new iteration for this idea. I'm not going to let it go. I'm not going to let it die. But I do just want to ask you, if you know someone that is an investor, if you work in venture capitalism, or your parents do, or someone you know is, an established manufacturer and might want to partner with me, I'm open to all opportunities right now. And I would love to have a conversation with you if you are yourself interested. So that's my little pitch for this week. And hopefully in a week or two, I'm going to come back and give you guys a new update with the new news of what's going on with my plan. So thanks for listening. I know this was a long one, and I hope that you will follow along on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on Facebook. Come find me, find Relativity Textiles, and we'll be sure to let you know how it goes. All right, take care. Bye, guys.